What is up, 802 Garage? It is a beautiful day to do some car work, and I have been very delayed putting the transmission back into my Eclipse GSX, basically due to lack of a $2 clip which was broken by the previous owner. At least if I broke it, I don't remember, so I'm going to blame them because they have mangled plenty of other things I've discovered while working on this car. I finally got the parts that I need in the mail, so I am ready to start getting the transmission back into this beast, so I hope you will join me, and if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe and watch me get this piece of DSM history back on the road. Alright, so it's finally time to put the all-wheel drive powertrain back into the old rusty DSM, but before I go any further with prepping the transmission to go back in the car, I want to note a few things, and the first one is that I did powder coat the clutch fork and it came out really nice. I am going to have how-to videos so that you can do this yourself at home on pretty low budget. So I'll put a link up in the corner as soon as those videos are ready. I really like the way that that came out. But speaking of the clutch fork, one of the first things I want to note, it is often prudent to replace this anytime you have the transmission out of the car. They are known to break at the fork or just wear down over time, especially at this pivot ball point apparently. So you will note that I did clean that out very nicely. I made sure I didn't get a lot of paint in there anyways, but I actually took a wire brush on a Dremel just to clean that out really well. So it is a good idea to replace these. Mine, looks good, so we'll see how it holds up. Also a good idea to replace the pivot ball if it has any wear, and you'll see mine actually has a little bit of scratching, and so it would be a good idea to replace this. I don't have one on hand. I'm going to use some good grease, and we're going to see how it holds up basically. So this is kind of like when I told you that you should definitely replace the rear main seal anytime you have the transmission out. There are a few things I'm not replacing, which now is definitely the right time to do, such as the axle seals. So there's this one, and there's one on the other side too. Of course, always a good idea to replace those while the transmission is out of the car because it's going to be easier. And also this transfer shaft seal is a good one to check. Mine all look all right. I think it's gonna be fine. So I'm gonna send it like this, basically invoke some Boosted Boys magic, and hopefully it'll be all right. I'm not too worried about it. I also will note that I am missing a little transmission breather here because of course previous owners lost it for whatever reason. And I will show you too that this has been shimmed a little bit at some point, so I'm just gonna kind of go with it as is. I'm gonna go with it shimmed, considering I'm using the same pivot and the same clutch fork. So those are basically the main notes on this transmission. I know a lot of you have commented on my videos asking if I watch Jafromobile. I do. A great channel for information, so if you want more in-depth info on these transmissions and things you should know and watch out for, definitely go watch some Jafromobile videos. Also, dang, just a quick note, it is really incredible how much this transmission's been through. I mean, they cut off the counterweight. This surface looks completely beat up, like they must have pried on it there at some point. I mean, the holes for the dowel pins, which are still in the engine, by the way, you definitely want to make sure the dowel pins are there for this transmission to line up. Those are all beat up. Pretty much all the holes in this transmission are beat up. Even this seal, the metal surface around it is kind of beaten up. It's just like, oh, what happened here? Clearly, something came apart at some point inside of this transmission. This rubber boot is all beat to crap. It's just crazy how much this transmission has clearly been through. So I don't know if it came from another car or this car originally or what, but hopefully it's gonna hold up well for me. So another bit of prep I did on this transmission before putting it back in is I did grease the crap out of this linkage, and I actually took off this little rubber cap too, made sure there's grease in there where those bolts are, and that's just so that all this can slide freely. And there's actually a little rubber boot down here, you can see that moving, and I kind of took that off of the base and filled that with grease, and then I made sure that I moved it in and out a bunch of times so that it's all well lubricated. Now I thought this would be cool to show too for anybody who wonders how the shift linkage works. So basically this is kind of like moving the stick left to right in the car, and then this would be like moving it up and down. So you start all the way down, and this is actually first gear, and you'll notice that if I spin this, it's going to spin the output shaft for the transfer the same direction, and right here would be neutral, so now I can spin them independently. But so you've actually got first, second, and then you've got third, fourth, and then you go up and you've got fifth, and then you'll notice that if it's in fifth, it still spins the same way, but this one spins a lot faster. And then you've actually got reverse, and so now it's gonna spin the opposite direction of how I spin this shaft. So I just thought that was pretty cool to kind of see a live demo of the shift linkage working. Alright, and basically that last clip is as far as I got on transmission prep before I realized I wasn't going to be able to go any further, and that is because I found this broken clip. And so this is actually the throwout bearing retainer, and you can see that this arm over here is a little bit bent up and mangled, and it's also longer than that one because this one had a nice, probably 45-degree bend in it, and when I tried to form it back into shape, it just snapped off, so it no longer holds the throwout bearing to the clutch fork properly. But I got a new one in the mail along with a couple of other parts, and also you will see that I have powder coated the battery tray during the time that I could not work on the transmission, so that came out pretty nice despite some rust pitting. And again, I do have some tutorials on those that you can definitely go watch, so pretty psyched about that, although there are a lot more parts on this car to restore. So I'll just do a mini unboxing for you now. Oh, and if you're wondering why I have this box over the transfer case, it's just because I was protecting it from powder coat. Alright, and let's see. First thing, I got a Vibrant Performance exhaust gasket because the old one on the car was, first of all, the wrong size. It was too small, and second, it was all rusty and beat to crap and missing the edges because I think they had to clip those to get it on. My GSX has a Megan Racing downpipe, and it's a 3-inch inlet, I believe, and the outlet from the turbo is only 2.5-inch, so this more or less adapts it. Hopefully, that's the plan. Let's see, what else did I get here? Oh, so this is kind of, oh, I guess they came in the same package. But basically, I got the little breather that was missing on the top of the transmission here, and I got a brand new retaining clip, which actually looks like it may be powder coated. It just says some kind of black coating. I don't know. It looks pretty nice, though. It looks like it definitely has some kind of coating on it, almost like a plasticized surface. So either way, you can see the difference between this one and this one is that one, it is not all beaten up and the angles are slightly different, and two, the left side is much longer and it's actually going to function. As for this little breather, well, that just helps make sure that air gets evacuated from the transmission properly. You basically just, you know, like, whoop, pop it right in. I'll probably put like a little bit of lubricant on it, but you get the point. That little ring right there retains it, so hopefully won't lose that again. This stuff all did come from STM Tuned or Street Tuned Motorsports, but stmtuned.com is where you would go to get the stuff, and they have extremely reasonable prices. I'm in no way sponsored by them, just figured I'd give them a quick shout out for getting this out to me pretty quickly, basically only 3 days from shipping. And so total, just so you know what I paid, this was only $2.16, this was $4.66, and the exhaust gasket was $4.23, I think. So grand total there was $10.53, but I actually got a 54-cent discount. Yes, I have some little notes here. $7.70 for shipping, so grand total for all three parts was only $18.23. I did consider actually buying the pivot ball, but I believe it was something like $12 or $13, and mine honestly isn't in the worst shape, plus I'm probably not going to put tons and tons of miles on this car, and I wanted to get one of these rubber boots for the clutch fork too, but those turned out to be something like $14, or maybe it was even over $20, but either way, they were pretty pricey, so I just skipped it because this one still functions at least, even if it's not perfect. But so, STM Tune treated me well, good prices, happy about that. Alright, so I do want to go over a few more tips before installation, but again, like I said, if you want really detailed info, go to Jafromobile, awesome source. I am pretty wary about leaving these two shims on the pivot ball, considering I'm using a new clutch and flywheel, but I'm gonna roll with it because I've seen a lot of people needing to shim them online, and I think as long as it's not pre-engaging the clutch before I even push the pedal, it should be fine because you can always adjust the stop of the clutch to be a little bit earlier. Basically, Jafromobile suggests kind of going over this with your fingernail just to check if there's any really bad pitting or scoring or scratching in it. And mine definitely has some wear on it. And there's maybe a little rough spot right here. It seems like that's probably just dirt, like it'll come off. And I really just wanted to go over all this for you guys because I am trying to be as detailed as possible with this Eclipse GSX transmission install, just because I wanted to show you that I'm doing everything right along the way. Alright, and I also took a Scotch-Brite pad and just kind of cleaned up this shaft a little bit, and now it's a little bit smoother, took off some of the corrosion, so I'm happy with that. So next I'm going to show you installing the throwout bearing to the clutch fork and then onto the transmission, and that does require the retaining clip that broke. So I'm going to show you how that goes over the throwout bearing right now, but first I want to show you, if you look at this throwout bearing, you can actually see that the bearing surface that the pressure plate's going to ride on is not centered. There's a lot less gap over here than over here, and so at first I thought I had a defective product, but this is by Koyo Japan, so I trust it. This is a reputable company and a quality bearing, and I went online just to make sure because any company can have bad parts, and it seems like this is actually pretty common. Some people say that they've gotten multiple OEM bearings that all have this, so I don't know if it's intentional by design or if it's just how it's come out over the years that the machinery makes them this way. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to orient the side with the bigger gap down, just kind of under the principle that gravity and drag is going to pull that downwards a little bit. So that means on this clutch fork, I'm going to have the side with the gap facing that way. But basically, so that means that with the clutch fork this way, I'm going to have the wider side down towards the bottom of the clutch fork because it's oriented in the transmission basically like this. So next I'm going to show you installing that little retaining clip, and so you can see with the gap further that way, this basically goes over the top like this, and it's pretty simple. I'm just going to put in one side first, and that rides behind that lip, and then this side I'm just going to pull over and right over that ear, and there you go. That is installed, and I can already say that this fits a lot better than the broken mangled clip I had. And then this is going to go onto the clutch fork like this. So you can see basically the clutch fork is going to go there, and it's supposed to go through the little holes on the ears of the clutch fork. And I'm just going to pull out one side, get it through, and then I'm going to pull out this side, show you that, until it can go in the hole. And there you have it. It's now retained on the clutch fork itself, and that's going to be able to push and slide freely on the transmission. Having gone through all that, I do actually want to put some grease in there before I go ahead and leave it like this so that everything can slide freely and take the pressure without ever getting damaged. So for greasing all the components I'm going to show you right now, I'm going to be using this Valvoline full synthetic grease. It is supposed to be pretty high quality, and it can take a lot of pressure. It's supposed to have some moly content, so that is good, and I will put a link down in the description to buy this. It's actually pretty cheap if you buy it on Amazon, and the can will last a long while. It's kind of a nasty color and look though, so I'm just going to put some right onto the ears here, and then a little bit down where the clutch fork is going to contact, and then I'll put some on the fork itself as well. You can actually see the wear pattern in there. This side was worse. Put a little on all the surfaces, especially the front there. Alright, so I greased all the surfaces on the fork, and now I'm just going to go ahead and reinstall it onto the throwout bearing. Now it should all be held nicely in place. So that little clip, which cost $2.16, was really the missing link to installing this transmission, and now I'm going to grease up this shaft, again using the Valvoline synthetic. Just kind of try to get it greased all the way around, a little more on the front. And you could use the grease that comes with the AWD kit or whatever clutch kit you went with, but I'm going to use this because I know that it's pretty high quality. And then I'm going to put a little bit on the clutch ball as well, of course, and the pivot ball. Just going to kind of leave a glob on the front so that it can distribute it itself. I'm also going to put a little bit of grease into the actual pivot itself. There we go. And this grease isn't in a spot where it should fling off and get onto the clutch or anything, so I'm not too worried about that. Now that I greased that pivot itself, just feed the fork through the little rubber boot here, and put the bearing on. Start to slide that over, and then this all should just kind of clip into place. There we go. Nice snap lets you know that it's in there. And then this should nicely pivot like that. Looks good. I'm going to put a little more grease on the front here, just to make sure that that front bearing surface really gets it. Clean that up a little bit, since it doesn't need to be over greased. And there you go. Now pushing on the lower end of the fork pushes out the bearing. I'm also going to put some of the same grease onto the outlet spline to the transfer case. However, I'm not quite done yet. I am actually going to use the grease that came with the AWD kit to grease the splines right here, and I'll show you how they recommend doing that. Basically just tear open the pack and get a nice distribution of this grease on the splines, and then just kind of rub it around, make sure that they're fully coated. But this is going to be more than you need. I just want to make sure that they're well coated. And then my clutch disc is already installed on the car, but I am going to use the old one. They usually say what you do is take this and just kind of run it over the splines. Like that. And that should take off most of the excess. I'm going to go in here and clean this up. And I'm probably going a little heavy on the grease side compared to what most people would do, but that tends to be my method, if you will. Everybody's afraid of this grease slinging out and getting all over the clutch disc. So I'm going to clean this up real quick too, and then just go over it one more time the other direction. So like I said, I'm probably a little more liberal than a lot of people would be, but I'd rather have a little bit of extra lubrication rather than too little. And the reason I actually went with the exited grease is just because that's specifically what this pack is meant for, is the splines which the clutch are going to ride on, and I wanted to make sure I used the exact right product. I'm fine with using the Valvoline full synthetic for the other areas just because I know it's going to take the high pressure well. Now there is one other thing I wanted to check out. This is the throwout bearing that was on the car, and I don't know exactly what kit it came with or anything, but I actually managed to make out that it is NSK. I don't know if you'll be able to see that on video. It says Japan. And there's the part number right there, which looks to be 48TKA3201. I think this may be the OEM part, but you can see it was getting pretty worn in right there and right there. This sleeve to the inner surface definitely has seen better days. It looks a lot different than the new bearing, and it doesn't seem to have the kind of gap difference that the other one has, but it's also a very different design, a kind of smaller surface this rides on, although this one has a lot of roundedness to the surface that's going to push on the pressure plate. So that's very interesting because this is a much smaller surface, but also I can feel that it's a little bit grumbly in there, maybe getting a tiny bit dry. So either way, definitely glad I'm replacing it. I'd say the build quality, you know, seems similar, just very different designs overall. I'm sure someone down in the comments can tell me which one is OEM. I could definitely look it up, but I don't really feel like doing that right now. I think the NSK is OEM, but I wouldn't be surprised if they had reused a different bearing even though they changed the clutch kit, because as I've said, the previous owners and previous mechanics were pretty not careful with most of what they did. So either way, replacing it. Actually, I just went and placed the throwout bearing back on the old pressure plate, and you can see too from that thin kind of flatter design, it was really wearing in to these teeth on the pressure plate. You can see right there, like my whole, I can actually feel it with my thumbnail. But I do find that pretty interesting. I like the fact that this one has that rounded surface, because that means as it is used to fulcrum those teeth, they're going to kind of roll over it rather than having a kind of flatter face which digs into it. So I would say this is the better design. It also seems like a beefier bearing, if I'm being honest. Like maybe it has a larger inner diameter for the balls, but can't confirm that without taking it apart, of course. So either way, happy with this part other than that little difference in the two sides, but a lot of people online said it was normal, so hopefully it'll be fine. And with that, this transmission should be ready to go back on the car. I did also put some silicone gel on both the driver's and passenger side axle seals, as well as on that seal for the transfer case shaft, just to make sure that it is protected from the elements and a little bit lubricated to keep that rubber nice and soft. So yeah, the whole assembly is looking a lot better than it used to, and it should be properly lubricated, which it seems like on the last clutch install, honestly, it probably wasn't. Again, whenever you take the transmission out of your car, it's definitely the best time to replace all the little bits that you can't get to while the transmission is in the car. Luckily, I can replace the axle seals on the car if I ever need to. Hopefully that's going to last really well for me. So thank you so much for watching, everybody. That's going to be it on this transmission for right now, but in the very next video it is going to be getting fit back up inside of the car, and then we'll see how far I get with all the other little bits and pieces like the transfer case and drive shaft and axles, etc. But it shouldn't be too hard to slap that all together, and then we can try to start the car. As always, thank you all for watching 802 Garage. It means the world to me, and you're definitely helping me make it to my goal of 10,000 subscribers by the end of this year. If you made it all the way to the end of the video and you're not a subscriber, you must want to see this thing start, so please subscribe to my channel, 802 Garage. Otherwise, if you're a longtime viewer or just somebody who likes this video, please hit the like button, leave a comment below. You know I always love talking to you folks. If you see anything I did wrong, definitely let me know so I can fix it before it all goes awry once the car is up and running. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you soon on 802 Garage. That's right, just work the shaft.